Okay, if you're listening to this, you're either an atheist, a theist, or agnostic. And today, I'm going to prove to you that that's the same person. The same person. There's no difference between a theist and an atheist, and I think I can prove it. So this series of ideas that I'm about to lay out is probably bordering on the laughably ridiculous, the painfully obvious. The connections will be questionable at best. But here it goes. Today is December 4th, 2021, and I'm going to prove the existence of God using cryptocurrency, basketball, possibly some evolutionary psychology, and animal behavior evidence. So, here we go. Nice chilly Saturday morning. Got my cat with me. So, for those crypto nerds out there, people who paid attention to the cryptocurrency market as it's been developing, as it's developed over time here, will have noticed an interesting pattern that occurs at certain points in the valuation of these currencies. So, I'll start with Bitcoin, just because it's the most famous one. For those people that remember when Bitcoin crossed the $10,000 mark, for those people who watched closely what happened, or maybe for those actually who didn't watch closely what happened. So, Bitcoin crossed $10,000 some number of years ago. I don't remember exactly when, but I remember watching it happen. So if you watch a currency like Bitcoin, which had never crossed the $10,000 mark ever, there had never been a Bitcoin traded, at least on an open market, for more than $10,000. And then you can watch, imagine a stock trading graph, those things that those stock traders are always looking at, the price going up and down, the red bar and the green bar, where it gets traded at. So something very, very, very interesting happens at certain numbers when the price is going up and down. So in the stock trading world, they call this a psychological barrier. So when you hear the word psychological barrier, you might think something like, fear of heights, fear of elevators, I don't know, fear of commitment. But really, in the stock trading world, there's a very interesting phenomenon that occurs at numbers that are easy to remember. So a number like $10,000 is a number that to a human is significant. To a human being, 10,000 is a very clean number. It's, some kind of multiple of something, and it's to something like Bitcoin, crossing the $10,000 mark was a significant event. It's a big deal. For years, Bitcoin was worth like a penny, right? And so watching it grow and get more popular and watching the valuation go up, hitting $10,000 was actually a significant moment in Bitcoin history. And so something interesting happens with Bitcoin. So if you watch the price, I'm just going to describe what happens. The reason behind it, like the behavior behind it that causes it, is actually probably a whole video in itself. But the actual behavior is, you'll watch the price. So it's going up 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, right, over some number of weeks or months. Price is slowly going up. It's fluctuating like Bitcoin does, very rapidly fluctuating, up and down, up and down. Sorry, cold out today. So what happens is it will get to the high 9,000s, right? It'll get to 9,900, 9,990, right? And it will float just underneath $10,000. The price will get up to close to 10,000, then drop. It'll get up close to 10,000, then drop. close to 10,000, then drop. It'll do this multiple times as if it's bumping into a ceiling, right? It'll do this. The price will fluctuate as if 10,000 has some sort of meaning. If you're a non-human, see the way that this works, right? What makes this interesting is that 10,000 truly is not an interesting number, other than to a human, right? To a robot, why does 10,000 matter? It's no different than 11,000 or 10,001, right? There really is no. The difference is only psychological, right? It's only in your mind that 10,000 actually matters, and yet the price behaves as if 10,000 matters. The price gets up to 999, drops down, 999 drops down. And then what's amazing, to me, what is actually amazing here, is that the second it crosses that $10,000 line, right? The second that it gets cleanly over 10,000, because the price is pushing up. People are buying, people are getting excited about Bitcoin, as we know. It's currently, as of the making of this video, it's at like 60,000 now. So, you know, the excitement's there, the price is going up, it finally crosses $10,000, and then watch what happens. It will jump to 11,000 within minutes, right? It will go from 10,000, and then it will shoot past 10,000, as if energy was building up. So there's this kind of energy that builds up. It hits 999, 999, it keeps bumping into it over and over again for some amount of time. It could take days, it could take weeks. But if you watch it, it'll get up and drop, get up and drop. The energy will sort of build. And then eventually it crosses that 10,000 line, and then it shoots past 10,000, like way too far, and then it drops again. But the point is that 10,000 is not special to anybody except to the people who are doing the trading. Again, like I said, this is going to border on the obvious. This is bordering on obvious, but the point here is that this is a psychological barrier. And it only exists because, well, it exists because it exists. It exists because we think it exists, really. And I know that I started this by talking about God. I'm about to start talking about God. And I want you to not, this is not my argument yet. Not yet. Not yet. I just wanted to talk about what a psychological barrier is, just so everybody's on the same page here. So, you'll notice this happened with Ethereum as well. Ethereum is like the number 2 cryptocurrency. It's Bitcoin, then Ethereum. Watching Ethereum cross at $1,000 was actually the exact same process. It gets up to 999. It keeps bumping up against it, and then the second it crossed 1,000, I mean, I watched this live. I remember this one. This was in likely 2018. I remember sitting in my apartment. I had the graph up on the TV. I was watching it with a buddy. And it kept bumping up against 1,000. And then once it crossed 1,000, it got to 1,100 so quickly, it's insane, right? It jumps from 1,000 to 1,100 like immediately, because the pressure that's there builds up, and the pressure builds up at these numbers that are simply in our minds, right? 1,000 is not special to a stock trading robot, right? It's only special to a stock trading human. But the behavior of the stock market is obviously influenced by it. Okay, so that's a psychological barrier. Now I got to talk about some things that are going to just sound either completely obvious or completely ridiculous, depending on the ears of the person, depending on who I'm talking to, really. So, basketball. What is basketball? What is basketball? Basketball is a sport, a competitive sport, a team sport, played between 2 teams, 5-on-5, right? On a court, with a ball, a couple nets, a scoreboard, people watching sometimes. I believe I'm describing basketball right now. It's a very popular sport, a national sport. Millions of people watch it. So, where is basketball? Can you touch basketball? Can you point at basketball? Where in reality is basketball? So I'm not talking about a basketball. I'm talking about basketball, the sport. Where is that? What is that? Does it exist? You can't touch it, right? You can't touch a sport. So, is it the rule book? If you pick up the rule book to basketball, the NBA rule book, is that basketball? Are the players basketball? No. No. None of these things are basketball. Basketball is an intersubjective concept. It exists because we believe it exists. That's it. If everybody on planet Earth were to wake up tomorrow and forget basketball existed, basketball would no longer exist. We could rediscover basketball. If you could imagine the middle of a basketball game, you wave a magic wand and make everybody forget basketball exists, right? The stadium, everybody in the stadium, all the players, suddenly, from one moment to the next, the concept of basketball has left their mind, right? So suddenly a player standing there in a court holding an orange ball, be like, what the heck am I doing? Everybody'd be looking around, like, what are we doing here? Could they rediscover basketball from that moment? Possibly. There'd be a rule book somewhere in the stadium. They'd be reading it like some ancient text, like, look, people used to play a game that looks like this, and they'd look at the hoops and be like, this is a strange, you could rediscover basketball. But the point is that basketball doesn't really exist anywhere other than in the mind, in the shared minds of everybody. But the thing is, to say that basketball doesn't exist is really strange, right? Nobody would ever tell you basketball doesn't exist. That it doesn't make any sense to say that, because clearly it exists. Clearly. But this word exist, what exactly does that mean, exist? And this is where I start to get into places that are tough to talk about, obviously. I can't walk up to somebody and say, hey, basketball doesn't exist, because obviously it does exist. But it's an intersubjective concept. Intersubjective. That's what's important. It does exist, but only in a certain sense. Only in a certain sense. And again, this is not where I'm about to go with God. It's not. I'm not saying God is intersubjective. I'm not saying that. Not yet, at least. Because I don't know if that entirely counts for what you would call God, right? So, hopefully I've made this clear. Hopefully people, every time I bring this up, somebody's always like, well, people don't seem to quite understand what intersubjective means, and it's a difficult concept to get across. I'll do one more example really fast. The United States. Does the United States exist? And this is the same kind of question as basketball, right? On one sense, obviously the United States exists. Obviously. It would be ridiculous for me to suggest otherwise. Clearly it exists. But where is it? What is it? Can you touch it? You can touch the land, right? Poking the ground here. I'm in the United States right now, right? So when I say where is the United States, you're imagining a piece of land with some borders. But we know borders are imaginary. We know that the land is not the nation. The nation can expand or contract. So the United States is an intersubjective concept, is what I'm trying to say. It's not the Constitution. If everybody woke up tomorrow and forgot that the United States exists, it'd be in the same situation as basketball. You could rediscover it. We could go look at the Constitution and figure out what rules we were going by and try and rediscover the United States. But the point is that it's not the Constitution, it's not the people, it's not the land. It's none of those things. The Constitution, the United States is just an idea. It's just a thought, a belief in your mind that we all share. That's what it is. It truly only exists in your mind. Truly. And if you don't agree with me on this, I'm not exactly sure how to convince you otherwise. I've had this conversation with people in real time, in real life, back in the day when we used to have human interactions. I used to have this conversation, and oftentimes I would fail to convince the other that intersubjectivity is a real thing. If you don't understand what I mean at this point, then I believe what I'm about to say will just be lost on you, so my bad, sorry. Okay, so now I get to the hardest part. Now I get to God. God. The existence of God. So in, how do I start with this? This is such a interesting, who can just prove the existence of God in one YouTube video? So in Pinocchio, just to start down a Petersonian line of thinking here. In Pinocchio, there's a character, Jiminy Cricket, and Jiminy Cricket represents something. Your conscience. So what's a conscience? What is that? It's an internal voice. We all have one. Every human being has one. I assume. Maybe a psychopath or somebody doesn't, but even them, I believe they have one. So what exactly is an internal voice? And do we not all have one? Could you possibly deny that we have one? So I'm just going to start running through examples of the inner voice, right? What about when you're hungry? Is that your inner voice talking? When you start to get hungry, does your behavior change? When you see a cheeseburger or something delicious in front of you, are you not driven in some way? And is that driver not part of your internal voice? Same thing goes for sleepiness. When you're very sleepy, it's been a long day, you see a comfortable bed, maybe you're laying down on a comfortable bed, your driver, your internal driver will take over. It doesn't really matter what I've talked about this quite a bit, but your rational mind and your irrational mind are in a strange relationship, really. You constantly have these internal drivers, these internal motivations. And so you might be thinking, being hungry or sleepy isn't what your conscience talks about, right? That's not what Jiminy Cricket would have words about. How about something like sex drive? When you're horny, when you're turned on, is that your internal voice? What's going on there? Who's talking to you? What is talking to you? Is it Jiminy Cricket being like, hey, go fuck that thing right there. Go stick your dick in that, right? Is that what Jiminy Cricket is telling you? Again, you might disagree. You might say that's not what your conscience is. Your conscience is something else. So here's the question then. This is a feeling I believe everybody has experienced. We're getting into a world known as phenomenology, which is probably just something you should go look up. It's a real thing. This is not woo-woo here. This is science we're talking about here. Phenomenology. So there's a scene in the Iliad, written by Homer, or spoken by Homer, or whatever. You know that book they made you read in high school. That one. There is a scene where Achilles is in a conversation with Agamemnon, the king of Greece, or the emperor, or whatever it is. The ruler of Greece, the guy with all the armies, is in a conversation with Achilles and says something that insults Achilles. I think he makes fun of his girlfriend or something. I don't know. He says something that makes Achilles upset. And Achilles is about to punch Agamemnon in the face. He's about to get up there and, if the movie Troy has taught me anything, it's that Achilles looks exactly like Brad Pitt. And he's a hothead, right? So Agamemnon pisses him off. Achilles is about to punch Agamemnon in the face. But then Minerva, the goddess, appears and grabs Achilles by the hair and pulls him back so that he does not punch Agamemnon, the ruler of Greece, in the face, right? So do you think the Greeks, when they read this story, believed that a goddess truly appeared in that room, truly grabbed Achilles by the hair and pulled him back? Or do you think that Minerva represents something? That maybe Minerva, being the goddess of wisdom, I believe, the concept is that, okay, Achilles the hothead, instead of punching the ruler of a kingdom in the face, had a moment of wisdom, and that guided his behavior, right? So the Greeks understood this. This is similar to Jiminy Cricket, right? It's a conscience. You have a voice inside of you that appears sometimes. And if you listen closely to it, you'll notice that it's talking to you all the time, really, this internal voice. when you're sitting around playing video games and eating Cheetos, there's part of you that, if you listen closely, will say, hey, maybe I shouldn't be spend all day doing this, right? And when it comes to treating, it comes to treating not just others, but how you treat yourself, right? Your conscience guides all of your behavior towards yourself, like how you guide your own personal decisions, and it guides your decisions towards other people. Like you know when you talk to people, people you care about especially, you have an internal voice that tells you what you should say to them and what you should not say to them. Like, you can think about somebody you love. Think about, just whoever's listening, think about somebody you love and you care about. Now think about something that you could say that would really insult them, that would really hurt them, right? You can, if you love them and they trust you, there's probably words that you could say to them that would really hurt them. And you can imagine yourself saying it, like play it out in your mind, and you'll get this feeling like, ooh, I shouldn't do that. You know, like, I know I can do this. Like, I think about it and I get this feeling, and it's this like internal voice saying, whoa, okay, don't do that. Don't do that. And I go, okay, internal voice, I won't do that. And so what is that? What is that internal voice? Is it real? Yes, I think it is real. I think we all have a conscience. So, all right, this internal voice guides our behavior. We all have it. We all have it. Where does it come from? What is it? Where does it come from? So, how is it possible that we as humans all have this thing in common? You know, is it magic? Is it just placed upon you when you're born? Is it part of the human soul? You know what I mean? Like, where I think the answer is obvious. Like I said, this video is going to be either obvious to everybody or ridiculous, depending on your ears, right? Depending on your brain state right now, your state of mind. It's really obvious to me that your conscience is built into you, and things that are built into you are placed there by evolutionary forces. And so this is that jump, right? There's like this jump that not everybody has made yet. Not everybody. Not everybody has read Darwin's book. It's only been out 150 years. Probably 170 at this point. That's not long enough for everybody to have read it, apparently. Metaphorically speaking. So, organisms have been interacting with organisms for all of history. Species have been interacting with their own species since the beginning of their species. Usually. Some species don't have that many interactions with their own species, but some species have many interactions with their own species, such as humans. Almost all humans that have ever existed have had some limitless number of interactions with other humans. So this is why the conscience exists. You have an internal voice inside of your body that guides your behavior towards other people. Because behavior that you have will either make you more or less evolutionarily successful. You're going to be more or less likely to reproduce depending on the way you treat other people. That should be obvious. And it also, the way you treat yourself, the way that you behave making your own personal decisions is going to influence whether you pass on your genes or not. That should be obvious. So, the internal voice you have is entirely designed by evolutionary forces. When you're thinking about saying words to somebody that will hurt somebody, right? When you're thinking about doing a terrible thing and you get that internal voice that says, hey, don't do that. That is placed there by an evolutionary force. Evolutionary force. So, how can you... I don't want to go down the evolutionary pathway. You know, I make this argument so many times that I just assume that anybody that's listening to this channel believes this, right? Because I know I've talked to creationists who are going to tell me that, you know, something else happened that made humans, right? But no, humans are animals. Animals have the same internal voice. If you look at a wolf pack, for example, or if you look at rats, you know, these are examples that are, again, down the Petersonian line of thinking here. The wolf pack has a morality. They all behave a certain way. Every wolf has this internal voice. When they interact with each other, you can find rules that they're kind of using to guide their behavior. And these rules are built into them biologically. They're born with these rules. They're like instinctual. It's an instinctual internal voice. And the same goes for rats when rats play with each other. I almost hesitate to just bring this argument up because this is exactly what Jordan Peterson talks about. But when two rats play with each other, they'll wrestle and they'll pin one or the other. And it's kind of a... You know what? Forget that. Just go look up his argument on rats. Like, I don't want to repeat what he says. I don't want to just be a mirror here. But, oh man. Okay, so the point is that we have an internal voice, and God is an attempt to understand the internal voice. God is a transcendent concept. The Bible is a story about a transcendent concept that is both internal and external in a way, right? It's an understanding of the internal voice. It's an attempt to understand. It's an attempt to understand the morality that we're born with, but the only way to understand that is to have a concept that actually exists outside of all of us. And so you can imagine that the internal voice is similar, can be conceived as exactly what Zeus looks like, right? Or exactly like these depictions of God. Imagine these depictions of God that show him, first of all, a guy, which is an important concept here. It's a dude in the sky that sees everything, right? That's what almost all depictions of God look like, and similar depictions of other theological concepts that people have come up with over time. There will be a father figure. There's often a mother in most theologies, but what's important about at least Christian theology or a lot of the monotheistic religions is that there's a father figure in the sky watching you, all of your movements, everything you do. You can never not be watched. And so if you think about it, the internal voice that you have, the conscience, how do you best conceptualize that? You conceptualize that as, wow, I spent 27 minutes here and I might have gotten myself in a hole. You conceptualize your internal voice as if there is a judgmental father watching you. So when I think about something that I might do and I get that terrible feeling inside of me, I could think about that as, okay, I have this evolutionary instinct and it has, this behavior will make me less likely to reproduce, and that's why this thing is happening, right? I could think that, and I could be correct. Like, rationally, it is correct. Like, I have this conscience. Jiminy Cricket is following me around, talking to me, because of millions of years of evolution that has guided animal behavior and made them more or less likely to reproduce. And so I have this built-in instinct, like this genetic, it's an embodied knowledge that's inside of me. It's a behavior. I have embodied knowledge that guides my behavior. So I could think about it that way, or I could just think God is watching me, right? I could just think that that's just God speaking to me, right? I could think, when I hear that internal voice, I don't go, okay, animal instincts kicking in. I go, okay, the guy in the sky is watching me. And you'll notice that the behavior looks exactly the same. You'll notice that the conceptualizing the internal voice this way doesn't really change it doesn't make it less real. Like, the reality of it is still exactly the same. It's just a different way of conceiving it. And then you go think about so I started this with psychological barriers in basketball, intersubjective concepts. So if you think about it, just because God isn't real, does that mean God isn't real? You know what I mean? Just because it only exists in our minds, does that make it not real? these psychological barriers in stock markets and crypto trading are real. You can make money off of them. You can predict them. You can have a model that predicts behavior based off of something that really isn't real. Same thing goes for basketball. Basketball isn't really real, but it clearly has an effect on our culture and our society. We all behave as if it's real. Same thing with the United States. We all act like it's real, and that makes it real. We have a military that goes around the world and has a very real effect. So to call the United States not real is insane. It's wrong. And so think about this. Think about God. To call God not real is very strange because we all act as if God is real, right? We all have this internal voice that guides our behavior. And this internal voice and the conception of God, we all act like God exists, is what I'm trying to say here. We all act as if there is a judgmental Father watching us. This guides our behavior, really. And so I believe the Bible is actually just one of the greatest psychological works of the human race, right? At least the first, maybe not the Bible specifically, but the concept of God really is just like humanity's attempt to have a concept that really describes the behavior that's already there, right? Like the behavior came first. And the attempt to understand the behavior is God, really. And so, does God exist? We all act like he exists. None of us don't. Even atheists act this way. Even an atheist has a conscience, an internal voice, right? So, then you get into this weird thing. Like, what's the relationship between your rational mind and your irrational mind? What is it? What is it? And just because you say you believe that there is no God, but you act like there's a God. You know, I can say I don't believe in basketball, but I act like basketball exists. And I've told you, basketball doesn't really exist, but I act like it exists. So, when I say I believe in basketball, what am I talking about? What am I believing in? I'm believing in some sort of concept that floats around in intersubjective space. So if I say I believe in God, what am I talking about? What am I talking about? I'm not talking about like a thing, right? I'm not saying it exists like this tree exists. So I think that's probably the end of what I need to talk about here. I messed up. This is my first try at this. I think I could have made this far more streamlined, but hey, I woke up thinking about this morning, so if you got this far, and thank you for listening. I'm gonna go find my cat, and then I'm gonna end this video. So, yeah, I've been wondering what the point of this channel is. Again, I always wonder, why am I making these videos? Am I really trying to convince people that God exists? Do I really care? I'm trying to make my arguments clear, because I keep saying that I'm an atheist, but also I believe in God. Like, I keep saying that. I'm trying to explain why. And I don't think I really made it clear even now. I think that the part of the point of God is that it's not definable. I think that God almost provides a concept that is like the end point of it's like the highest value and if you have a value hierarchy, which I've always talked about, if you think about it, I don't want to keep making this argument, but you're always somewhere going somewhere, right? You're always in a place going to a place. As just an animal, as a being, as a thing that moves, really. You're always trying to understand where you are psychologically, mentally, spiritually, physically. Like, where are you really is a strange thing to talk about. And then where are you moving towards? And this could be not physically, but like if you're sitting there at a computer and you're like, okay, I need to write a chapter of a book right now. Where you are is on your like you have written 12 chapters and you need to write the 13th one. Where you're going is that writing. So you need a value set. You need to have something that guides that orients you, that points you in a direction, and then guides your behavior in that direction, right? And if you don't have that, then you have no orientation and you truly have no direction. And my cat's way up a tree. Perfect way to end this video. Dusty's way up there. All right, I'm gonna flip this camera around. Dusty, what are you doing? Look how high up there he's going. I finally got a video of him up a tree. Finally. Way up there. So yeah, this what is Dusty's value set? See, he's being guided by some kind of built-in morality as well. Like all of us are. We're all guided by something. And understanding what is guiding you is important. You have to understand your own values, and you have to understand that your values are actually just, many of them you're just born with. You're just built with values that you don't even know exist. But the values are placed there by millions and millions of years of evolutionary pressures. And it might turn out that God is actually the way to understand those values. It might truly be the best way to conceptualize that value set. There really might not be a better way to conceptualize it. And you can come up with all sorts of different arguments for this, and I encourage you to try, but in some sense, it's like you're talking about water and you're a fish, and it's hard to, your rational mind is just not, we're not good at thinking about this stuff, we're good at eating and fucking, really, but we're not. Alright, I'm gonna end this video now. See you later.